What is up, you guys? Shan's here, and I'm so excited to bring you another episode of the Completely Living podcast where we talk Bible, faith, and go wherever the Holy Spirit leads us. And today we're getting into Genesis chapter 13. So last week we finished up with Genesis chapter 12. We've been going through the Bible chronologically, which means that in the middle there we went and did an adventure in the book of Job. We read all through Job and then came back. And now we're back into Genesis. Today we're doing Genesis 13 in the NLT version, or the New Living Translation. Now you can read whatever version of the Bible you would like, but I am going to put the words for the NLT version on the screen so you can follow along if you're able to watch the video. If you're listening to the podcast, then hopefully I am going to do it justice and read correctly and pronounce the names correctly and all that good stuff. All right. Let's get into it. So Genesis chapter 13, the first heading that I have is Abram and Lot separate. Verse 1. So Abram left Egypt and traveled north into the Negev along with his wife and Lot and all that they owned. I already have to stop because if you remember in chapter 12, we talked about Abram going into Egypt and how there's no indication that God told Abram to go into Egypt. There was just a famine in the land, and Abram might have been feeling the pressure, felt like he needed to go to Egypt to figure things out. And when he's in Egypt, he does a little bit of lying. He gets his wife taken by Pharaoh. She is made one of Pharaoh's wives until there are terrible consequences for Pharaoh. And then Pharaoh tells Abram, can you leave? Take everything and just go. And take this woman who you told me was your sister, but is actually your wife, and go. So now Abram is traveling to the Negev, which means that he's going back to where he came from. So he went on this detour that we don't know if God sent him on, and now he's going back to where he came from, which makes me think even more that I'm not so sure God meant for him to go to Egypt and be lying and get his wife taken. But we'll see. Verse 2. Abram was very rich in livestock and silver and gold. From the Negev, they continued traveling by stages towards Bethel, and they pitched their tents between Bethel and Ai, where they had camped before. So see, we have, again, he's going back to where they were before. It also mentions here in verse 3 that they're pitching tents, which in chapter 12, they mentioned a lot about camps, and Abram was setting up camps. And I made a point to say, like, look, see this person, he's not attached to the land or trying to find a big house. He is trying to go wherever God tells him to go, which means that he is setting up these temporary housing establishments and these tents and just going wherever God tells him to go, which I do really love. Verse 4, this was the same place where Abram had built the altar, and there he worshiped the Lord again. Just coming back. Now, what if you hadn't wasted time in Egypt? If it was you know what? Something that's very interesting. This trip to Egypt that we don't know if God told Abram to do. There's a famine and he was feeling the pressure. He has a lot of people in his command. So he goes to Egypt. This trip to Egypt, when they leave Egypt, he comes out of this with servants. And one of those servants, and if you happen to know the story of Abraham and Sarah, when they're trying to have children, you will know where I'm going with this. One of the servants that he leaves Egypt with is Hagar. Hagar is going to come back up when we're talking about them and the promise, the covenant that God had with Abraham and him having many children. And in their wait, or their patient waiting or not so patient waiting to have children, Hagar ends up coming into play, and Sarah gives Hagar to Abraham to have a child. And you just have to wonder if any of that would have happened if Abraham wouldn't have went to Egypt, where we don't know if God told him to go. And this started the animosity between the sons, and this is all spoiler alert, but Abraham's sons, Isaac and Ishmael, the conflict between them and all of the years and generations after that. Would that have happened if Abraham had not went to Egypt and if he had not came back with Hagar? Something to think about. Verse 5. Lot, who was also traveling with Abraham, had also become very wealthy, with flocks of sheep and goats, herds of cattle, and many tents. But the land could not support both Abram and Lot, with all their flocks and herds living so close together. I wonder if the land really couldn't support them, or if they just felt that way. Because God is abundant. I don't know. Okay. Verse 7. So disputes broke out between the herdsmen of Abram and Lot. At the time, Canaanites and Perizzites were also living in the land. Okay, so there's more people than just them. Finally, Abram said to Lot, "Let's not allow this conflict to come between us or our herdsmen. After all, we are close relatives. The whole countryside is open to you. Take your choice of any section of the land you want, and we will separate. If you want the land to the left, then I'll take the land to the right. If you prefer the land to the right, then I'll go to the left." Interesting that Abram gave Lot the option. Like, Lot got to pick which land he wanted. I find that interesting considering, like, Abraham is he's the one who God chose to have a covenant with. But Abram is just like, listen, I'm just going where God told me to go. What land do you want? I'm not here for the problems. Where do you want to go? Just please take the land that you want. So, all right, verse 10. Lot took a long look at the fertile plains of the Jordan Valley in the direction of Zoar. The whole area was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord or the beautiful land of Egypt. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Spoiler. Lot chose for himself the whole Jordan Valley to the east of them. He went there with his flocks and servants and parted company with his uncle Abram. So Lot looked at the land that he thought was like more fertile, more watered, more beautiful, and he took that. Verse 12. So Abram settled in the land of Canaan, and Lot moved his tents to a place near Sodom and settled among the cities of the plain. And I actually circled the word near Sodom in verse 12 because as we progress here and as we continue reading, we're going to see, we know that Sodom and Gomorrah ends up getting destroyed because they just mentioned it. And we see that Lot is deciding to settle near Sodom. And let's read verse 13. But the people of this area were extremely wicked and constantly sinned against the Lord. So they're sinning, they're people who are doing bad things and sinning against the Lord. And Lot is deciding to settle near them. And you have to ask yourself, why did Lot choose to settle near the sin? Was that a good idea to settle near the sin, that proximity to sin? And then we're going to see that at some point, it's not going to be that he settled near the sin. He's going to be living in the city of Sodom. He's going to move into the city. And it's kind of showing us that we as people, like, you get a little close to the sin. You flirt a little bit with the sin. And then the next thing you know, you are in the sin yourself. You're living in it. Before you weren't living in it, but now you're living in it. It's just very interesting to look at how Lot progresses, and we'll see how he ends up. He doesn't just end up living there. At some point, he's one of the elders who sits at the gate in Sodom, meaning that he is like a high up respected person in Sodom. So he went from living near the sin, like I'm not really a part of it, to fully being like an important member of the society there. Verse 14. After Lot had gone, the Lord said to Abram, "Look as far as you can see in every direction, north and south, east and west. I'm going to give all this land as far as you can see to you and your descendants as a permanent possession. And I will give you so many descendants that like the dust of the earth, it cannot be counted. Go and walk through the land in every direction, for I am giving it to you." So Abram moved his camp to Hebron and settled near the oak grove belonging to Mamre. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. There he built another altar to the Lord. And that is the end of 13. So this is just like a quick chapter of what happens in 13. We have Abram leaving Egypt, going back to where God told him to go, getting back on track, getting things back on track. And we have his separation from Lot so that we can kind of understand the progression of Lot's story and where Lot's going to go and what is going to end up happening to him. So it's all very interesting. This is a good connective chapter before we get into chapter 14, where we get to learn a little bit more about war. The first mention of war in the Bible. I mean, unless you want to talk about the fallen angels and the war in heaven, that was before. We'll get into it, okay? Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you comment. Tell me what you think about the fact that Lot is living near the sin, and tell me what you think about the fact that Abraham went to Egypt, and if he was supposed to do that. Obviously, God knew he was going to do it, but that's not the question that I'm asking. Is like, was he told by God to do that, or did he make the decision? Tell me what you think in the comments. Like, subscribe to the channel, do all the things, and I will see you next time.